Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
Today's experience begins long before the encounter itself. It begins in a house where anger seems to have become routine. Silence felt unnatural, and every room seemed to hold its breath. As one family struggles beneath the weight of addiction, fear, and growing tension, something else appears to be thriving in the cracks that are left behind. Whether what followed is something born from trauma, coincidence, or something far, far darker, well, that's something I'll leave entirely for you to decide. But what I will say is this: by the time this submission ends, you'll understand why its submitter was so reticent to tell anyone beyond their own family. And who knows, maybe between us we will pick up something that the submitter has missed and maybe bring a bit more clarity to their ordeal. But let's find out if that's going to be the case as we begin episode 4 of season 25 of the Dark Paranormal. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 4 of season 25 of the Dark Paranormal. Now, as you will note, no video again this week. I'm going to be brutally honest with you. We've decided as a team our video format was literally not up to scratch. We knew for sure that we couldn't release episode 3 in video format as it was a well-known tale, but in my eyes, not well known enough. However, we didn't believe we could do it justice. And on reviewing what we've already recorded, video-wise, we're all in agreement it's not up to scratch. Now, those videos for episode 1 and 2 will still be released on YouTube as promised. But what we're going to do is, beginning this weekend, revamp the entire studio setup. And I'm talking we have a builder skip arriving on Saturday morning, and me and the team are going to actually gut the entire upper loft, so we can turn it into the ideal video/podcasting setup. Because as you will see when we upload the videos for episode 1 and 2, with the exception of the wonderful video intro that's new for that particular show, there's something very amateur to them, which is something we genuinely feel could hurt this show, your show. And so we're going to start with our video reboot from episode 6 onwards. Now, if you're new to the show entirely, we read 10 of the darkest true paranormal experiences sent to us by our wonderful listeners each and every season. Which means after you've heard this episode, there's another 243 main episodes to listen to wherever you get your podcasts, and about 100 plus hours of bonus shows made up of our weekly minisodes and bi-weekly Dark Realm shows, where we take a look at one haunted location each episode. And make sure to listen to the very end of this program, because at the end, we explain how you can join our exclusive Patreon community, which will grant you anything from early ad-free releases to 2 additional Patreon-only shows each and every week of the year. And there's also information at the end on how to share your experience with the show. Oh, and of course, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all of those things that tickle the algorithm and allow more people like you to come and join us in the darkness. But right now, as always, it's time to lower the lights. Make yourself comfortable and, of course, leave your disbelief at the door, as we hear all about our true rental terror, the evil in the closet. Before I share my experience, I would just like to say that I absolutely love the show. I've been listening since 2023, and it's amazing to listen to all of the experiences so far. It's always shocking to see how many people have experienced something paranormal, whether that be big or small. On that notion, my mother has always said that we are spirits. Even right now, through the flesh, there is something inside of us that's just something we cannot see. The energy of a soul that can center another soul within a room, even if it's just yourself in it. And although I've considered submitting my experience many times before, I've always backed out of it. I've just never felt ready to revisit the details of my encounter. And I'm really not the type of person to go out of my way and share these things, so this will quite literally be my first time doing so publicly. I will be using different names for the privacy of my family and me, but I'm excited to share my story with the show. I would love to know a more public opinion on exactly what I could have encountered, whether that be a ghost, an entity, a manifestation, a demon. I'm not sure myself either, and it's been a topic of debate for many years now. Before I do get into the meat of this encounter, I'll need to set some background so it's easier to understand why I believe this thing may have been attracted to my home. I'll refer to myself as Eve. I must have been around 4 or 5 years old at the time. My family lived in a small 2-story rental house. As the youngest out of my sisters, Marie and Justice, I had a bedroom to myself because I wasn't old enough to start school yet. Every morning, my mum would wake up early to take my sisters to school. When she came back home, it was just the two of us. Some days we'd go grocery shopping or spend time at the park. Or maybe visit one of her friends and I would play with their children. Most days, though, we stayed at home. Even when my mum was there, I was a quiet child who preferred to spend hours alone in my room. I could entertain myself without much effort, and I rarely complained. However, looking back, I think I instinctively kept to myself because it felt safer. The less attention I drew to myself, the less likely I was to get into trouble. At the time, I didn't understand why my mother always seemed so overwhelmed. As children often do, I blocked out much of what was happening around me. My way of coping was to retreat into my own little world, isolating myself from the tension that filled the house. I didn't have the words to explain it then, but I could feel that something wasn't quite right. My parents had been together since high school, and my mum became a mother while she was still a teenager. That responsibility forced my dad into the workforce at a very young age, taking physically demanding jobs that slowly wore him down, both mentally and emotionally. Over the years, he began relying more and more on alcohol to cope. By the time we lived in that rental house, his drinking had escalated into the use of proper hard drugs. The man who came home each evening often seemed like a different person. He was paranoid, restless, unpredictable. His temper could flare without warning, and anger seemed to follow him wherever he went. Almost every night, as soon as he walked through that door, another argument would begin. The shouting became so routine that it felt as predictable as the setting sun, and my sisters and I learned to live around it. Then, when the arguments finally died down and dinner time rolled around, we'd all sit together at the table, quietly eating whilst pretending not to notice the thick tension hanging between Mum and Dad. No one said much. That silence often felt louder than the shouting that had come before it. At that age, I knew nothing about my father's substance abuse. To me, he was simply an angry, unpredictable man who happened to be my dad. He always seemed irritated by something. And as a young child who was still learning how to do everything for the first time, I very quickly realized he had no patience for mistakes. So my sisters and I learned to stay out of his way whenever we could. We walked on eggshells around him, always careful not to say or do the wrong thing, because we never knew what might set him off. Some people might say the drugs were responsible for how he behaved, but looking back, I don't think they created the anger that was already there. They magnified it. Whatever bitterness and frustration he carried inside himself became something darker and much more volatile. It turned his anger into something dangerous, something everyone in the house had to be constantly aware of. One memory has stayed with me more vividly than most. I remember seeing him sitting alone in the garage on an old lawn chair. He had a beer in one hand and a gun in the other. His eyes darted constantly from one side of the street to the other, scanning the neighbouring houses as though waiting for someone or something to appear. His paranoia was impossible to ignore. Even if I was too young to understand what I was witnessing, now that I'm older, I understand much more than I did back then. Whether it was the constant fighting, the fear that settled into every room, or my father's deteriorating state of mind, that house carried a heavy atmosphere, one that seemed impossible to escape. It felt as though the negativity had soaked into the very walls themselves, lingering long after the argument had ended. Nearly every vivid memory I have of that rental home is connected with my father. Living with him was like rolling a dice. You never knew which version of him you were going to get. As his drug use and drinking worsened, so did the feeling inside the house. My eldest sister was the first to tell us that she had experienced something she couldn't explain. She described waking up one night to see what looked like a head peering out from beneath her own desk. Its face appeared to be made of swirling white and black smoke. She said it stared directly at her with dark, empty eyes before slowly smiling as their eyes met. Then, just as suddenly as it happened, it dissolved into the air, as if like smoke from a candle that had just been blown out. Terrified, she squeezed her eyes shut, convinced herself this hadn't been real, and forced herself back to sleep. But according to my sisters, these unsettling experiences didn't stop there. As my father continued to spiral, more places around the house began to feel unnervingly different. Whether it was my imagination, fear, or something none of us could explain, there were certain rooms that always carried, the uncomfortable feeling that someone else was there, just out of sight, quietly watching. My bedroom closet, the downstairs laundry room, my parents' bathroom and closet, the dark corner of my sister's bedroom. Each of those places carried a sense of unease that none of us could easily shake. Everything started to feel off, and my father was the scariest he'd ever been. One day he'd come home from a hunting trip. I was in the living room while my mum was in the kitchen cleaning. He came into the house with a cooler of meat, which was very normal after a hunting trip. But I didn't expect what he was about to walk in with next. You see, he came back into the house with a deer's head, holding it by its antlers, a freshly killed deer, still bloody, its base jagged where it had been cut. I was mortified. My mother gave him a disappointed frown, more asking where he planned on keeping it. He shrugged and continued walking out to the backyard, where he placed it on a big rock and left it there. A few days later, my mother forced him to get rid of it, because not only was it disgusting, but I refused to step foot outside and play. Things grew strangely quiet inside the house. My sisters and I played more softly, and instead of arguing with my father, my mother began ignoring him. For a while, it almost felt peaceful, but it wasn't real peace. It was the kind of peace that settles just before a storm, when everything feels still, too still. There's not much you can do about the money you have now, but if you want to do something about the money you could have tomorrow, Acorns wants to help. And with the Acorns potential screen, you can find out what your money is capable of. Acorns is a smart way to give your money a chance to grow. It's easy. You can sign up in minutes and start automatically investing your spare money, even if all you have is spare change. Because Acorns grows with you. Whether you're just starting out or thinking about settling down, Acorns supports your big and small goals across every life stage. And the Acorns potential screen shows you the power of compounding and how your money can grow over time. Plus, you can quickly adjust how much you're investing every day, every week, or month to make sure you're building toward your goals. Acorns is an all-in-one. No more finance apps cluttering up your phone. With Acorns, you can invest, save, and give your money a chance to grow in one trusted place. I've had and used many financial applications, but the specific thing about the Acorns app I love is the potential screen. Of all the apps I've used, it gives me such a clear picture of the opportunities for my cash to grow. So sign up now and Acorns will boost your new account with a $5 bonus investment. Join the over 14 million all-time customers who've already saved and invested over $22 billion with Acorns. Head to acorns.com/darkparanormal or download the Acorns app to get started. Paid non-client endorsements. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. T2 compensation provided. Potential subject to various factors such as customers' accounts, age, and investment settings. Does not include Acorns fees. Results do not predict or represent the performance of any Acorns portfolio. Investment results will vary. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/darkparanormal. I'll be the first to admit I am not the most organised man in the world, especially when it comes to organising a dinner party. There's usually always a missing ingredient, and normally it's the main ingredient, which then leads to a rushed supermarket trip to pick the best of the worst that's been left out. A problem that would simply not exist if I was stateside and able to use Omaha steaks. With the ability to get fresh Omaha steaks and keep them frozen in my freezer, I would never have this danger again. With things like their legendary steaks, their flavour-filled burgers, and seafood and chicken, it's like having your own trusted butcher and gourmet food shop right at home. And you may think, can frozen delivery be this good? Well, yes. Omaha steaks are known for their meticulous aging process and vacuum-sealed individual packaging. And if you've never tried them before, start perfectly with the Burger Perfection Flight. The Burger Perfection Flight includes 4 pure ground versions of the following meats: filet mignon burgers, New York strip burgers, ribeye burgers, brisket burgers, and sirloin burgers. Try the Burger Perfection Flight at omahasteaks.com today. That's 20 premium steak burgers for just $79.99. And get $35 off with the promo code BEEF. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code BEEF for $35 off at checkout. Terms apply. See the site for details.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
Looking back, I think all of us knew something was wrong. None of us talked about it, but we could feel it lingering in the walls of that house. Perhaps we were all just trying to hold on to that fragile, false sense of calm before inevitably something shattered it. The uneasy feeling that had always hung around the house only grew stronger during that time. My sister kept seeing things she couldn't explain. The rest of us began hearing things. We would hear our mum calling our names, but that would be from rooms she wasn't in. The worst moments were when we'd hear our names whispered from right beside our head or directly behind us for us to jump and turn and find no one there. Sometimes, lying in bed, I'd hear a faint whisper drift from my closet. Eve. I would slowly turn towards the closet door, my heart pounding, only to see it exactly as I'd left it, empty. Or at least it appeared so. Although, when nighttime came, everything felt heavier. The sensation of being watched transformed into the unmistakable feeling that something was following you from room to room, always just outside your line of sight. But one night in particular was different. My mum had tucked me into bed, kissed my forehead, switched off the light, and left my room. Only after she'd left did I realise that she'd forgotten to close the door of my closet. It was stood wide open across from my bed. Now, normally, I would have gotten up pretty sharpish to immediately shut it. I utterly loathed sleeping with it open. It had gotten scarier and scarier to me because I'd always felt watched. But that night, I decided I wouldn't close it. My sisters were sleeping with their closet doors wide open, without any problem. And my parents certainly weren't worried about theirs being open. And so, with a deep breath, I figured maybe it was time to stop being so afraid. Maybe this was the perfect opportunity and the perfect night to prove to myself I could be a big girl. So, I stayed in my bed, and I looked all around me whilst laying down. Moonlight was spilling in softly through the window. My nightlight cast a long shadow of things across the room. My toys lay scattered around the carpet, their shapes barely visible in the darkness. I stared at the ceiling, thinking of things and trying to get my mind bored enough to sleep. And then I heard a loud ooh, ah, ooh. My eyes snapped towards the sound. One of my own toys had started making a noise. If anyone does remember the old Sing-A-Magic toys, they'll know they don't just turn on by themselves. You need to literally squeeze their stomach in order to make them sing. My heart slammed against my ribcage as I shot upright in bed. I couldn't move. I just stared, second after second, minute after minute, into what felt like hours as I waited for it to make another sound. With my ears trained on that specific toy noise, you can imagine my shock when instead a raspy crackle echoed from directly in front of me. From deep inside my open, and I believed empty apart from clothes, closet. The laughter was low, dry, almost wheezing, as if someone was forcing air through ruined lungs, through a ruined throat, and out of a ruined mouth. I slowly turned my head. My clothes hung motionless inside the closet. And then, something shifted behind them. A face emerged, staring directly at me. Its smile twisted unnaturally wide and amused. I couldn't understand what I was looking at. I'd never seen anything like this before. I was confused, I was scared. Is it a ram? No. A goat? No. It looked like a grotesque mixture of both, fused with a human face that stretched into something impossibly wrong, like a goat's face with human eyes and a ram's horns. But before I could even process anything about what I was seeing, it spoke.
I want you and your family.
Its voice was rough and strained, the voice of someone who had spent a lifetime smoking, each word scraping painfully from its throat, and then it laughed again, that awful, cackling laugh. My face burned hot as tears welled in my eyes. I let out a very shaky, "What are you?" It smiled wider than before, and there was a silence. Within it, anger started to fill my chest beyond my tears. Inside of me, something grew defensive and angry at what this thing had threatened. I loved my family. However messed up or broken it was at the time, I knew I loved them, and I'd always hoped for better. So, instead of completely breaking down as a child usually would, something inside me broke and pushed back. Maybe my mind hadn't fully accepted that what I was seeing could possibly even be real. Maybe I was simply too shocked to understand the danger, or rather too angry now to care. Whatever it was, fear gave way to defiance. I threatened it back. "My dad will shoot you. He has guns and he will kill you." The moment the words left my mouth, that goat/ram's head slowly disappeared. Not by stepping backwards, not by fading back into the closet. It warped, distorted, and fizzled into thin air, as if somebody had switched off an old TV screen. Static almost, but thin enough to blur back into nothing. Only after it was gone did the terror finally catch up with me. I screamed as loud as I possibly could, and within seconds my mother had burst into the room and flipped on the lights. "What's happened? What's happened?" she said frantically. The moment I saw her, I completely fell apart. I sobbed uncontrollably, and I mean uncontrollably, pointing towards the open closet. She rushed to my bed, wrapped me up in her arms, and tried to calm me enough to understand what I was trying to tell her. It took a very long time before I could finally explain that I'd seen something inside my closet. She turned to look back into the open closet, but didn't question a single word I'd spoke. She simply brushed her hands through my hair, and before I knew it, I'd cried myself to sleep. I still don't know where I got that courage from, or what I even saw. How I was able to see it right in front of me and not through the corner of my eye. I heard it speak to me. It locked eyes with me, as if it were another physical being in front of me. At the time, my family was already preparing to move to another house, though I just didn't know that yet. My mum assured me I was simply a frightened little kid, one whose imagination had got the best of her. It wasn't until years later, when the topic of course came up again, that I told her everything I'd seen in detail on that night. She then began explaining to me the dreams she would have around the same time that I experienced this thing in the closet. In one dream, she said she stood alone in the bathroom, washing her hands as she normally would, but as she looked into the mirror, another face appeared directly over her shoulder. Another bodiless head floating above with a twisted smile. It smiled at her before its smile grew into a frown. Then it let out a loud scream and looked at her with a rageful expression, an over-exaggerated rageful expression as she described it. As its features distorted and became more horrifying, she jolted herself awake. When I heard about this dream, I went pale from connecting the dots. Apparently, she also began experiencing sleep paralysis around the same time. She told me she'd wake, unable to move, her eyes locked on the glowing numbers of the clock, while something was creeping around the side of the bed, always just outside her vision. Which was weird because she'd never experienced sleep paralysis before, or after this one time. Everything began only after she and my dad decided it was time to leave the house. When I thought she was done telling me all, she told me another dream that she'd had around the time before we moved. In this dream, she was rushing me and my sisters into a car late at night. She said she felt scared, as if we were all being followed or chased. She described the street as completely empty, but the feeling kept her rushing to buckle us up in the seats. Before finishing, she watched a human-like creature on all fours crawling towards us. She said it was slowly dragging itself across the pavement to the middle of the street while whispering loudly over and over,
Please don't leave. Don't leave. Don't leave.
To this day, I don't know what was in that house, or what might have brought it into being. All I do know is eventually we left. And after we did, everything got better. Not completely good, but better than before. For example, my father had stopped taking drugs, but was still on alcohol. I'd started going to school and life started to continue again. It's taken me genuinely years to fully digest the whole experience. I still wonder to this day what it could have been. Why it wanted my family, and why it said it was going to eat my family. I've listened to many paranormal experiences, and I've watched many investigation videos on YouTube, etc. And I've never heard of someone conversing with an entity beyond the use of a tool, let alone seeing one face to face and hearing it speak. I think, in a way, whatever was there did see us as food though, and in some way did want to eat my family. Perhaps not in the physical sense, but most definitely in the spiritual sense. The kind of spirit food that negativity loves to attach itself to. I think that house was the perfect environment for such negativity to thrive, and therefore feed off. I think it's why my mother kept having these terrifying dreams, and as scary as they were, it was always trying to convince her to stay. Which I will say right now, I am beyond glad that we didn't. Anonymous. Well, Anonymous, thank you for giving us our 4th episode of Season 25, and also for, whether you know this or not, an episode that kind of solidifies and adds further credence to theories we've been bandying around on Dark Bites, for the Patreons and After Dark. And it's an idea that negative entities may need to build up enough negative energy before they're allowed to build themselves some sort of gateway into your home. Now, it's well known and can also be taken too far by some people in a religious sense, and also not taken seriously enough by others. But it is an often repeated and well pointed to argument that when vices start to become out of control in a household, that it's not necessarily the individual that's perpetuating those vices, like drink, drugs, etc. And if it is that person, then they kind of build that doorway themselves. We've had many a discussion about the alleged dangers of the Ouija board, and I do say alleged, yet in my opinion, I think it's as spiritually dangerous to be in a state constantly of either drunkenness or high on drugs. I believe you make yourself a gateway in the same way people state you do when using a Ouija board. And obviously, in this world, nobody can say either of those facts are true. And if anyone does, as I've mentioned before, run a mile. Because no expert in the subject is actually an expert in the things that can't be proven. That's an illogical statement. But I really want to know your theories as the listeners to this show who obviously have an interest in the paranormal. What are your theories about what we've just had? If you have a theory yourself that you want to put forward, you can email contact@thedarkparanormal.com, but that is only for theories. If you'd like to submit your own true dark paranormal experience to the show, then head to thedarkparanormal.com and click on Submit My Experience. The link is also in the show notes, where you'll also find the link to go and have a free week trial at whatever tier you wish on our Patreon. And with a back catalogue of episodes only heard by Patreons that comes into around 250 hours of content, it's well worth giving it a free try. But thank you all for joining me this week. It's unbelievable to think next Friday will be our midway point of the season, and of course the following week we return all guns blazing for that video format. And I cannot wait to get my teeth sunk into it because I knew there would be teething troubles, but it's one of those situations. If you don't start something because you foresee teething troubles, you never start anything. Whereas we've started it at the beginning of this season, we've hit the brakes, and now, more educated than we were at episode 1, episode 6 should be one that we are actually proud of. But until next time, remember, whenever you're discussing the paranormal, always try and leave some of your disbelief at the door. And I'll see you next time, right here on the Dark Paranormal.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.